rest in peace. You deserve it.
Thank you, Senator Walsh. We'll move to question time, and I'll call Senator Birmingham.
Thank you very much, President. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. During the 2022 election campaign, Mr Albanese said, and I quote, "We've said we have no intention of making any super changes." Given Labor's track record of proposing higher taxes on retirees at the previous 2 elections, it is inconceivable that Labor wasn't planning its doubling of the super tax or something very similar when Mr Albanese made this promise at the last election. Why, Minister, is it that Mr Albanese deceived the Australian people before asking them to vote for him?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thanks to the Leader of the Opposition in the Senate for the question. And it gives me the opportunity to remind him and those opposite and all that, in fact, the changing of these tax arrangements for a very, very small proportion of Australians will not take effect until 2025. 2025, after the next election. And it may be that those opposite like to forget about this and like to focus on, as always, their pathology of conflict. But the reality is what we have inherited is $1 trillion worth of debt. We have inherited a budget in a position that is unsustainable, and we are making sensible decisions about how to deal with that. And they include changing the concessional tax treatment of super balances over $3 million. And it is important, despite the rhetoric again of those opposite and their talk about doubling, to remind us all, those of us in this chamber who are on above-average incomes, that there is still tax concessionality associated with these balances above $3 million, earnings on these, still tax concessionality, which is effectively funded by the sorts of workers on the sorts of incomes that Senator Walsh was describing just before question time. And I, for one, don't believe that cleaners and people on the factory line should be subsidising tax concessionality for people with superannuation balances of $3 million. It is a very small proportion of people. It affects fewer than the superannuation changes, superannuation changes that you made, possibly when you were Finance Minister. I can't recall. And I know that those opposite want to run a scare campaign.
Your time has expired. Just a moment, Senator Birmingham. I called order at least 4 times there, and Senator Cash and Senator McGrath, you continued to interject. I would ask you to listen quietly. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Supplementary question. The minister just made a passionate defence of her beliefs that people shouldn't be receiving this concessional treatment. Given such strongly held beliefs, Minister, why is it that you and your government and your Prime Minister weren't honest with the Australian people before the last election?
Minister.
Thank you. I again make the point that this is a change that affects 0.5% of people, and it will not take place until after the next election, 2025. Now, I would also make the point that those opposite, and I'll take the interjections.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Order. Minister, please continue.
Always happy for Senator Gallagher to take questions. He answers them brilliantly.
Exactly.
Answers them brilliantly, as she demonstrated yesterday. I just would also make the point, I would make this point. Those opposite have really demonstrated to Australians whose side they're on.
That's right.
Yeah, they're not on the side. They're not on the side of people doing it tough. They're not on the side. They're not on the side of per people on minimum wages. They're not on the side of households whose electricity prices are finding it hard to make electricity prices, voting against the packages they wanted. They're not on the side of people who need skills. They're not on the side of
Thank you,
manufacturing
Minister.
jobs.
Your time has expired. Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. The government, including Senator Wong, keep referring to their alleged small number of Australians impacted. Indeed, Senator Wong on social media yesterday was posting about 99.5% of Aussies not facing any changes. Yet Senator Gallagher yesterday made clear in this chamber that 10%, 1 in 10 Australians, would actually be impacted. When was the government advised of this? Will they set the record straight? And will Minister Wong delete her social media post?
Order. Order. Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Minister, Senator Wong, please resume your seat. I'm not going to call the minister until we have silence on both sides. Minister.
Does anybody know how many people in 30 years will be affected by the concessional contribution threshold change to superannuation that they made? 30% of income earners.
Order.
30%. 30%. That's 1 in 3 of income earners will be affected by the changes you made on super. So let's be clear about the long-term effect of non-index changes. Senator Gallagher was up front yesterday about ours. I don't remember you ever saying that. Oh, by the way, 1 in 3 Australians will be affected by Mr Morrison's changes. The Australian people are onto you. They are onto you and they know what you are about. And you are not about average income earners. You are not about families who are struggling to pay ends meet. You're all about yourselves and you're all about confidence.
Order. Really, Senator Hume, when I've just brought the chamber to— beg your pardon, Senator Henderson. There's so much noise, it's hard to not be confused. Order. Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Wong has still 12 seconds on the clock.
Finally found some people that the Leader of the Opposition will fight for. Not women fleeing violence, not an Australian manufacturing, not businesses looking for energy security, not cheaper childcare, not cheaper medicine, not those looking for energy bill relief, but those with free—
Senator Wong, resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator Watt. And on the left. Order. Order. Senator Cash. Senators on my left. Order. Senator Hume. And Senator Ruston. Order. Order. Senator, I don't have any senators. Senator Ruston, I have no senators on their feet on a point of order. I simply have rude, disrespectful interjections across the chamber. Thank you. Thank you. Senator Ruston. Senator Wong.
I will withdraw. No, let me—
Senator Ruston.
I withdraw. And by way of explanation, I made clear I was referencing the housing fund that you opposed, which will be accommodation, including for women fleeing violence. So you weren't.
Order. Senator Ruston, I asked you 3 times to sit down, and I'm going to ask that you sit down. Order. Senator McGrath and Senator Watt. Senator Ruston, no, I'm going to have the call. I have no idea what happened because there was so much interjection in this chamber, except I had a bunch of unruly senators on my left and a bunch of unruly senators on my right. So I really have no idea. If someone has said something objectionable, you stand to make a point of order. You don't scream out, about 7 of you, from your seats. It is disorderly and it's clearly disrespectful, and it's taken me a long time to get control of the Senate. This is not appropriate. Senator Ruston.
Thank you, President. I was wondering if I could seek your indulgence to perhaps have a look at the transcript, and perhaps Senator Wong might then like to reflect on the fact whether she wishes to unconditionally withdraw her statement.
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Senator Wong.
I withdraw.
Thank you. Right. I have Senator White.
My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. What is the Albanese government doing to revitalise Australian manufacturing and address key national challenges?
Thank you, Senator White. Senator Watt.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator White for a question about jobs and about manufacturing. And of course, we on this side understand that one of the major pressures on our economy is disrupted supply chains. As the Reserve Bank has said, supply chain issues are responsible for up to 2/3 of inflationary pressures in the economy. So to relieve this pressure, we need to be a country that can make things here. Need to be a country that can make things here and stand on our own 2 feet, and that is what the National Reconstruction Fund is about. It is a fund that represents one of the biggest ever investments in Australian manufacturing capacity, revitalising Australian manufacturing, creating secure Australian jobs, making things here, investing in new industries like critical industries, and in seizing the opportunities for renewable energy. The National Reconstruction Fund is good for jobs, good for manufacturing, and good for the economy. So I suppose it makes sense that that's why those opposite would oppose it. That's right. Because these are the parties that neglected our supply chains and failed Australian workers, but they are very good at saying no. Just like they said no last year to providing families and businesses with relief from energy prices. They're more interested in the same old negative politics that you don't like the truth, do you? You don't like it. It's really amazing, isn't it? They vote against stuff in here and they don't like to be politically accountable for the things they voted against. I have never seen an opposition actually vote against price relief. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Always negative, always on the attack, even if Australia loses. They said no to the Housing Australia Future Fund. And I know those opposite don't like it, but that is additional housing for women and children, including those escaping domestic violence. You are accountable for that decision. You may say no to making super stronger for the future.
Thank you, Minister.
And no
the
to
time
ending
has
climate.
expired. Senator White, first supplementary.
Why is the National Reconstruction Fund important to all Australians?
Thank you, Senator White. Minister.
I'll take the interjection from the expert on the other side, Senator Scarr, who talks about debt. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. He thinks there's more debt. He doesn't want debt associated with a fund that's about investment, but he's happy with debt that's associated with a tax break for people exactly with $3 million in surplus. Right, well, there you go. There you go. Thank you for being very clear about your political priorities. Very clear about your political priorities. I mean, he's entitled to those views. I don't think they're the views that most Australians share. But I return to the question. Thanks to a decade of neglect and failed policies from the Liberals and Nationals, we do not have the manufacturing capacity to do what we need to do, and we saw that during the COVID pandemic. We couldn't make enough PPE to protect ourselves. Our fund is about building a more resilient, more diversified economy with more jobs in regional Australia, so we don't have to rely so much on other countries for some of our critical supplies, and to ensure we have the jobs and skills we need for the future.
Your time has expired. Senator White, second supplementary.
What are the obstacles to revitalising manufacturing and addressing these key challenges?
Minister.
Well, of course, the biggest obstacle, of course, is those opposite. Exactly. The biggest obstacles are those opposite. And one wonders why they'd be so opposed to revitalising Australian manufacturing, why they'd be so opposed to securing our economy. I mean, why don't they support Australian manufacturing? Why is it? Why don't they support economic sovereignty? Why don't they support Australian jobs? You know, I mean, we see a coalition that simply wants to say no. We have a plan to address the key challenges facing the Australians and the Australian economy: relief, repair, restraint, investment in Australian capacity, investment in Australian jobs. Those opposite have no plan. They left us with $1 trillion in debt, a massive skills shortage, a hollowed-out manufacturing sector, and now they're standing in the way of the solutions to the very problems they created.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Yesterday, Senator Gallagher, you said to the chamber that the purpose of the government's new doubling of super taxes was to make the super system sustainable. But the Retirement Income Review, published in 2020, said that the evidence indicates that the Australian retirement income system is effective, sound and broadly sustainable. Isn't Labor's doubling of the super tax simply another tax grab to prop up Labor's rampant spending, one that the now Treasurer explicitly promised not to do prior to the election because he knew Australians would never support it?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Well, the answer to that is no, but I welcome the opportunity again to remind those opposite about the mess we inherited from them and the seriousness that we are paying for the first time in a number of years around budget repair. We have $1 trillion of Liberal Party debt that we are managing, that we have to manage. We have pressures coming towards the budget that are increasing, not decreasing, and we can go through it again. Aged care, Medicare, hospitals, defence, all areas where pressure is increasing, not decreasing. We have a $50 billion structural deficit that we have inherited from you. That is what we are needing to repair, and that is what this very modest change to this concessionality of tax for high balance accounts over $3 million. It's a sensible change. It assists with budget repair. It means that we can make room for some of those pressures that you ignored but that Australians value. Things like paying for aged care workers. How about that? Making investments in those types of areas against a background of a budget that was riddled with waste and pork barrelling and failure to deal with the pressures. And this view, remember the back in black mugs, we all remember them. That budget was never going back into balance because we had a range of pressures heading their way, but we also had this very nifty way of budgeting, which is to budget for 1 year or 2 years for programs that are ongoing. I mean, the dishonesty in your budget when you were in government is galling, and we are fixing it. We take our responsibility seriously and we will get on with it.
Time for answering has expired. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. The Retirement Income Review also stated that the home is the most important component of voluntary savings and is an important factor influencing retirement outcomes. Given this important part of the retirement income system, will you rule out any changes to, including repealing, the First Home Super Saver scheme, which helps first home buyers enter the property market?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much. Well, we've made clear what our position is on this announcement that we made last week. The Prime Minister has made it clear on other aspects that have been raised in the last week. We have been very clear. It is a very modest, it is a very small change. It affects a very small number of fortunate people who have managed to save more than $3 million in their super. Good on them. Good luck to them. Their concessionality will be slightly reduced compared to what.
Senator Hume.
Madam President, the question was about the First Home Super Saver scheme and whether the government would repeal it or abolish it.
Senator Wong.
The question also started with the reference to the family home, hence the minister's answers entirely relevant.
Thank you, Senator Wong. It did have a couple of sentences before then, Senator Hume, and I think the minister's being relevant, but I'll continue to listen. And if the minister isn't being relevant, I'll remind her of the question. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I did answer the question in my first remarks. Yes, I did. I said we have announced the changes that the government has agreed upon. We have announced them. You have the detail. You're opposed to it. We hear that. We know that you're going. We know that you are going to die in a ditch for people with balances over $3 million, regardless of what's happening in other parts of the economy. I have answered the question. We have been clear with what our position is. The change was announced last
Thank you,
week.
Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Minister, as you referenced yesterday, Treasury modelling predicts that without indexation, 10% of Australians will be impacted by your new tax in the next 30 years. Will you table this modelling?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. That is information. That I had around the indexation. I'll check if there's further information I can provide. But I would say, in 2016, the changes you brought in affected 4% of people. In 30 years, they will affect 30%.
Senator McGrath.
That's what happens. 30%. 30%. 30%. Senator Hume. This is a very modest change. It allows for some budget repair to occur because of the budget that we have inherited. We have spent the last 9 months going through the rorts, the waste, the unfunded promises, the legacy funding cliffs, the zombie measures, billions and billions of dollars buried in that budget that you were not upfront about. We have gone through them. We are making sensible changes to assist with budget repair.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKim.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, last month the RBA said that as much as 3/4 of the increase in inflation is a result of supply shocks, including corporate profiteering, that their models are not well suited to supply shocks and that there is very little that monetary policy can do to offset supply shocks. So here we find ourselves today with an RBA responding to a problem it doesn't understand with a solution that doesn't suit. Minister, do you believe that the RBA smashing renters and mortgage holders with interest rate increases in response to inflation driven by supply-side shocks and corporate profiteering is the best economic policy that this country can muster?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much. And I thank Senator McKim for the question and for his ongoing interest in the performance of the Reserve Bank. I think the bank has a very difficult job to do, and I think the government has a job to work hand in hand with monetary policy. I await the decision of the bank today, but I think the bank has explained it's a narrow path that they are following. They have a difficult job to do. They are independent of government. I would say we have our review of the RBA. It's not linked, obviously, to the tightening cycle. We had announced that review. Well, it's looking at the issue, Senator Dunian can chuckle, but it's looking at the broader issue that's raised about how fit for purpose the bank is and the fact that it hasn't been reviewed for a period of time. For some 30 years, I think. And so this review, I think, is timely in the sense that we will get, some the three panellists' view on whether there needs to be changes to any settings, the mandate, etc. The government was aware of that. Obviously, it was election commitment before the last campaign. So I think that review in itself will allow us the best information available to check to see how to make sure that the RBA remains fit for purpose for the job that it's got to do. But having said that, I'm not linking that in any way to the tightening cycle. We do have an inflation problem in this country. The bank has a very clear mandate to ensure that inflation sits between the 2 to 3% band and ensure full employment. So they are following their mandate and they make their decisions independent of government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKim, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, real wages declined at the fastest rate on record in December. The Treasury Secretary said at Senate estimates that the risk of a wage price spiral remains low. Does your government believe that 9 going on 10 consecutive interest rate increases to avoid a non-existent wage price spiral is to the greatest advantage of the people of Australia?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I don't think the tightening cycle is being pursued in response to concerns about wages. I mean, the RBA has been, the bank was being clear when those opposite were in government and it was sitting at about 2% and not growing, that the bank was concerned at that point about wages. I think the comments they've made since when wages have started to lift is that they would keep an eye on wages. That's the general comments from the bank. But again, I think in terms of the job that they have to do, the risk of persistent high inflation is devastating, and it's devastating on people on lower incomes who will feel that the hit from inflation harder than those, I would argue, who are on higher incomes. And so, let's not pretend there isn't an issue here with inflation in this country. There is, and we have to manage it, and we have to make sure—
Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. Senator McKim, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, banks, supermarkets and fossil fuel corporations are all booking mega profits. You said that the government needs to work with the RBA. So will your government introduce a corporate super profits tax to drive down inflation and fund cost of living relief for Australians who are being smashed by inflation, interest rate increases and the cost of living crisis?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Gallagher.
Well, that isn't the government's policy to introduce a tax, as Senator McKim suggests, although I give him credit for persistence in asking me that question, but my answer remains the same. However, the point you raise on cost of living is real. I think the challenge for those of us looking at the right way to respond and how we do need to work hand in hand with the bank or on the monetary policy side is what meaningful difference can we make in a cost of living sense that doesn't have an inflationary impact. And they are the issues, they are the decisions we've taken around our investment in skills, the National Reconstruction Fund, making investments in housing, our cheaper childcare, our cheaper medicines. All of those are sensible investments which do come with spending attached, but sensible investments which don't put upward pressure on inflation but assist people with cost of living, and that's the energy cost relief is another area, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley.
President, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Industry and Science, Senator Farrell. Can the Minister please update the Senate about what the government is doing to support the Australian manufacturing, including through the National Reconstruction Fund?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And can I thank Senator Polley for that very insightful question, and of course acknowledge her very long-standing support for Australian manufacturing, particularly in her home state of Tasmania. As we all unfortunately discovered during the pandemic, the goods that Australians assumed would be there when we needed them were not available. Across a range of products, our supermarkets and pharmacies couldn't get what we needed. Who can forget going to supermarkets with the long lines of empty shelves and the sense of disappointment that we all felt when we couldn't get the products we needed? That was when the seed of the National Reconstruction Fund was planted. After a decade of neglect under the Liberals and the Nationals, it was time to reinvest in our manufacturing capability. Now that the government is seeking to make the NRF, the National Reconstruction Fund, a reality, it's once again the Liberals and the Nationals that are standing in the way. The government plans are to grow from our strengths, places where we already have natural resources or the human capital to compete with the best in the world. The National Reconstruction Fund will attract investment. It will help grow the Australian economy, but most importantly, Madam President, it will deliver high-quality, high-paying jobs for Australian workers.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley, first supplementary.
President, my Minister, as you know, manufacturing is a vital employer in many regions around the great state of Tasmania. What role will the National Reconstruction Fund have in revitalising regional manufacturing after the decade of Liberal neglect?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Farrell.
Thanks, Senator Polley. Well, I'd have to disagree with you there slightly, Senator Polley, because it wasn't just Liberal neglect; it was Liberal and National Party neglect that has brought us to the situation where we need a National Reconstruction Fund. And sadly, it was the former Liberal National Government that did neglect manufacturing right across Australia. I've seen it firsthand with Holden's and unforgivable decision to kick that company out of this country. And this is despite the fact that 1/3 of manufacturing jobs are in regional and remote Australia. Manufacturers are based across regional Australia because of the access to natural resources, from minerals to agriculture to forestry and to much more. The NRF determined to continue that focus on our regions.
Senator Polley, second supplementary.
Yes, my question, Minister, is what threats are there to the government's plans to deliver more skills, more high wages in manufacturing jobs and higher skills in regional Australia?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Polley for another very good question. Well, there they are, right across there. They're the obstacles to the creation of a National Reconstruction Fund. There are the threats for those opposite to improving our national self-sufficiency, investing in Australian ideas and turning them into great Australian businesses. Those opposite threaten plans to attract international investment and to deliver jobs, many of which will be right in your regional areas. The biggest threat to our plan for a National Reconstruction Fund is those senators sitting across the chamber. The coalition. They say no investment, they say no opportunity, and they say no self-sufficiency. The Liberals and the Nationals say no, no, no to Australian jobs and Australian manufacturing.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator David Pocock. Order on my left.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Housing, Senator Farrell. The Productivity Commission's latest report on government services showed that over 1/3 of people seeking homelessness accommodation last financial year couldn't find any. 1 in 3 people looking for somewhere to sleep can't find somewhere to sleep. Does the government acknowledge the growing demand on homelessness services, and do you have any plans to increase their funding?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Pocock for that excellent question, and I appreciate very much that he has a deep interest in this issue and a deep concern about the issues of homelessness in this country. And can I say the government generally shares your concern, but in particular the minister who has responsibility for this, Minister Collins, is very focused on dealing with this issue. And I mean, they're all extremely serious issues, but regrettably, at the last census, there were over 116,000 people experiencing homelessness in this country. And of course, that is an issue that we must address. It's unacceptable that so many Australians are now forced to couch surf, sleep rough, or live in temporary or overcrowded housing arrangements. Now, I understand, Senator Pocock, that you've had on a regular basis discussions with our minister, and that you have the opportunity to raise these issues and try and deal with these issues that require, obviously, negotiation between the states and the territories. Unlike the previous government, Senator Pocock, we are taking the issue of homelessness seriously, and we have started the process of delivering on all of the things that the previous government
Thank you,
failed.
Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. I appreciate your concern for the homeless, but I'll take that as no new funding. I understand that the government has written to state and territory governments offering to extend the National Housing and Homelessness Agreement by 12 months while the new National Housing Plan is developed. Can the Minister please confirm if this offer included a 12-month extension of the payment for the equal remuneration order?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Pocock for his question. Well, I would have to say in response to that question that I don't think it's fair to say that the government has no new funding in this area. If I can explain some of the things that
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Pocock.
Thank you, President. Sorry to call a point of order here. I'm just really interested if the 12-month extension for the equal remuneration order has been offered.
Yes, Senator Pocock, and in the first part of your question you also talked about no new funding. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Thanks, Senator Pocock, for that clarification. There are ongoing negotiations, and I don't think at this stage it's fair to draw any conclusions about how those negotiations might end up. Unlike the former government, we are serious about addressing the issue of homelessness in this country. We are engaged in a serious set of negotiations.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is...
beg your pardon. Sorry. My apologies, Senator Pocock. Second supplementary.
Thank you, President. I understand that the equal remuneration order hasn't been offered, which is $65 million worth of funding, and Homelessness Australia, whose CEO Kate Colvin is in the gallery, has said that without that money, some 650 frontline workers will lose their jobs. Given 1 in 3 homeless people can't find accommodation, how do we justify that?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Pocock for his questions. Look, I don't think I can be any clearer in response to that question and the earlier question. This government is serious about addressing the issue of homelessness in a way that the previous government wasn't even interested in talking about. There are discussions.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Ruston, your constant interjections are disrespectful and disorderly. I would ask you to remain silent for the remainder of his answer, Minister.
Thank you, President. Thank you for that protection from this unruly rabble on the other side. Yes, that's right. That's right. Senator Pocock, this is a serious issue. This government is serious about addressing the issue of homelessness. There are discussions underway. I'm not going to preempt those discussions at the moment, but rest assured that this government is going to take action.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Farming families are frequently cash poor, but they make a living off farmland that's value has tripled over on paper in recent years. Value that will remain unrealised, potentially for decades, for intergenerational farming operations. Will farmers that hold such land in self-managed super funds be forced to pay tens of thousands more in taxes under Labor's doubling of the super tax due to nothing more than paper fluctuations to commercial property prices?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Mackenzie for the question. As senators in this place would know, under prudential requirements, all superannuation funds are required to consider diversification and liquidity when making investments, and if funds are doing this, they should have some liquid assets to meet any tax liabilities. There are a range of cash flow requirements within an SMSF, not just tax liabilities, which trustees must consider. This includes, for example, accounting administration costs, investment fees and the costs associated with maintaining real assets such as property. For SMSFs with balances in the retirement phase, liquidity is also required for the purpose of meeting pension payments, including on those minimum drawdown requirements. Individuals can also hold their assets in super and elect to pay the tax or any tax liabilities they have using savings outside of superannuation to avoid paying from their business assets. So we have been clear what this change is about. It is for those with high balance accounts over $3 million. We know that there are accounts with hundreds of millions of dollars in them. Superannuation is primarily about having a dignified retirement and being able to have savings available to you during your retirement years. What we are doing is making a very modest change to the concessional arrangements that remain concessional for those with balances over $3 million. As to individual superannuation advice, I'm not in a position to give it, but I have made clear
Minister,
what the—
please resume your seat. I believe I have Senator Mackenzie on her feet. Senator Scarr. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. On relevancy, point of order. With the last 10 seconds left in the minister's ability to answer, the question was, due to the change made, will farmers now be subject to tens of thousands of dollars of additional tax as a result of unrealised gains?
Minister is being relevant. Minister.
Well, as I've said, and I'm not here to give individual tax advice to people, to arrangements I have no knowledge of. Okay, I have set out the government's policy. I have already.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Mackenzie, first supplementary.
Can the minister advise the number of registered primary producers that will be impacted through the government's proposed superannuation changes? Given her first answer, if not, why not?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Minister Gallagher.
Around 80,000 account holders who will be impacted by this very modest change. Well, thank you, Senator Scarr. You are the most patronising of all senators in this place. Honestly, your interjections, they're pathetic.
Order.
They're pathetic.
Order.
I know.
Order.
You can't help yourself.
Minister.
You can't help yourself.
Minister Gallagher.
You can't
Minister
help
Gallagher,
yourself.
please resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. Point of order on relevancy. How many primary producers will be
Senator
impacted by the government's
Senator Mackenzie,
policy?
you do not need to repeat the question. The minister is being relevant. Please continue, Minister.
Thank you. And if there is further information I can provide, Senator Mackenzie, I will undertake to do so. But the change affects around 80,000 account holders. Now, a number of them will be in SMSF arrangements, and another subset of them will have farms as part of their assets. So I will undertake to come back to you, but the whole group that is affected is in the order of 80,000.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Mackenzie, second supplementary.
Thank you. The National Farmers Federation has been critical about the complete lack of consultation from the Labor government on the superannuation changes. Why didn't the government consult before announcing changes that will result on an unfair new tax on the family farm?
Thank you. Senator Mackenzie. Minister.
Thank you. Well, as we've made clear in the announcement last week, that by announcing it ahead of the budget, but foreshadowing that it will be in the budget, allows for a period of further consultations. Now, that will be happening. Treasury will be undertaking a public consultation process on the implementation details, and we are open to stakeholders' views, whether they be through the NFF or others, around any refinements or any unintended consequences of these changes. That is the purpose of the consultation period. But I would also say to those that are defending this or opposing this change, this is a very modest change to raise a very small amount of revenue. We have a $50 billion structural deficit in the budget left by you. That's every single year. This raises about $2 billion.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Lambie.
Thank you.
Just a moment. I'll just check that your mic's on. I'll call you again. Senator Lambie, please start again.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Housing, Senator Farrell. Minister, the cost of housing, living pressures are hitting Tasmanians hard. The current average rent is $550 a week, and it is getting worse. The cost of groceries, fuel, energy and everyday living expenses are skyrocketing for Tasmanians. Life is basically getting harder. The waiting list for public housing sits at around 4,500, and that's on a good day. This list is growing and growing and growing. My question is in relation to the Housing Australian Future Fund. When will the detail of the investment mandate be finally released?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank Senator Lambie for her question. As I indicated in my previous answer to Senator Pocock on the issue of housing and homelessness, the government obviously recognises that this is a significant issue. The former government, in almost 10 years, did nothing in this space, and so of course we have to make up for 10 years of neglect. Yep. We're doing that, Senator Lambie, and as we speak, there are discussions underway in respect of the fund that you just mentioned. I'm sure if you would like, I can organise for you to have some discussions with the Minister responsible in this area about these issues to get some update on the latest state of play with these issues. But look, can I give you this assurance, Senator Lambie? This government understands that there are problems here, understands that there's been years and years of neglect, understands that we've now got the obligation of dealing with this issue, correcting the problems of the past, and making sure that we deal with this issue into the future.
Senator Lambie.
Respect, Madam President. I was just wondering whether I could have the detail of the investment mandate will be released. It's a simple detail. What date? What month? Simple. I just would have thought that was simple.
Thank you, Senator Lambie. There was also quite a long introduction to that question. I do believe the minister's being relevant, but I'll continue to listen, and if he's not, I'll draw him to the question. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thought I had directly answered your question, Senator Lambie, but I'll restate it. The investment mandate is currently being considered. Of course, the legislation hasn't yet passed the Parliament, and we understand, of course, that the coalition is opposing it.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Lambie, first supplementary. Order. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, Australia currently has a skills shortage across every sector. It is very hard to find tradies to do any work at the best of times on any home. We know a trade takes 3 to 4 years to complete, and that TAFEs in Tasmania are still training with Cold War equipment. Can the minister explain how the government will achieve 30,000 homes with no qualified tradies and with Cold War equipment in our TAFEs?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Lambie for her question. I mean, it's not the housing industry that's the only area that have labour shortages, as I'm sure you know. labour shortages are a relic of the inaction of the previous government, particularly in the pandemic area, where you sent lots and lots of people home who might have been here, who might have been here to help build some of these houses. One of the significant policies that we took to the last election, of course, Senator Lambie, as you would know, was the fee-free TAFE courses. Now, I appreciate that that doesn't come in overnight and it doesn't solve the problem overnight.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Your time has expired. Senator Lambie, before I call you for your second supplementary, you do need to be in your designated seat. Thank you. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President, for that correction. My last supplementary question is this. Minister, as my colleague Senator Tyrrell has brought to your attention, Tasmania has an entitlement of 1,200 homes. So why is it that we have the Housing Minister who represents Tasmania and we're only getting 600 of that? Will the government today, right now, guarantee me that Tasmania will get what it is entitled to and get their 1,200 homes for Tasmania over the next 5 years?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Lambie for her supplementary question. Look, I'd have the greatest of faith in Minister Collins. I was recently down in Tasmania with her, going to a range of places, and I'm sure that there's no better person in this government that understands the problems of housing and housing shortages and all of the issues associated with it than Senator Collins. And I think you should. Sorry, Minister Collins. No, I've upgraded it to the Senate status. Of course,
Senator Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Lambie.
With all due respect, Madam President, I just want to know whether we're going to get the 1,200 homes that we actually should be getting and not the 600, and whether that's going to be made right now. I don't want the waffle. Tasmanians just want to know we're going to get our what we do for 1,200, or you're going to take half it off us.
Thank you, Senator Lambie. I'll draw the minister to your question. Minister.
Thank you, President. Well, as I've said, I don't think there's any better person in this government to deal with the issues of housing in Tasmania than Minister Collins.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. Your time has expired. Senator Ciccone.
Thank you very much, Madam President. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. Minister, how will the government's $15 billion investment in the National Reconstruction Fund support a very important industry, the agriculture industry's ambition to exceed the $100 billion farm gate output by 2030?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Ciccone, someone who I know has a very deep and long-standing interest in the agriculture industry in our country. Well, today, Senator Ciccone, I have good news for Australian farmers, farm workers and all in the agriculture supply chain. Today's latest release of data from ABARES shows that the agriculture industry is well on its way towards its goal of exceeding $100 billion farm gate output by 2030. In the last financial year, the agriculture industry reached the $90 billion mark, an all-time record, and I congratulate every farmer, every processor, every worker and supply chain member for this achievement. Now, this was done off the back of what were, with some exceptions, great seasonal conditions, which have meant record farm cash incomes for broadacre and dairy farms over the past 2 years. But of course, the context to this is that input costs for farm businesses are rising, impacting farm profits. Years of failed energy policies and chronic underinvestment in skills development have come home to roost. As a result of this and global factors, agriculture input costs have risen sharply since mid-2021, particularly the price of fertiliser, which has more than doubled, putting intense strain on farming businesses to balance the books. And that's why the National Reconstruction Fund is so important. We need a future made in Australia, and that applies to agriculture just as much as every other industry. We should be value-adding, and we should be making more things here. The ability to make things here is vital to not only reduce input costs, but also increase the value of the final product that our agriculture industry rolls out. And that's exactly what the National Reconstruction Fund will do. Co-investing with industry, including agriculture, to grow our primary industries and turn raw products into even higher value ones. The Albanese Labor government wants Australia to be a country that makes things again, and we are backing our agricultural manufacturing industry to ensure that that happens.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thanks a lot, President, and thank the minister for that answer, particularly given the number of farmers in town today, given the ABARES conference being held today and tomorrow. Minister, how is the government, the Labor government, prioritising the agriculture sector in the National Reconstruction Fund?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Ciccone. Well, I'm very pleased to say that the $15 billion National Reconstruction Fund, it even has the word national in it, a key election commitment from the Albanese government, has a $500 million portion sectioned out for investment in local manufacturing to support agriculture. Once established, that money will be available to co-invest in more food processing, in bringing down energy costs and more value-adding. And a great example of something that could potentially fit in that category that we should be making here is fertiliser. We have the raw materials here in Australia that we export to other countries, so why shouldn't we be making more fertiliser here in Australia? And why shouldn't the government support industry to get it started? And that's exactly what our National Reconstruction Fund would be available to do, co-invest with industry to boost value-adding. I've been speaking about this with farmers and industry in recent weeks, grain growers, meat processors and many more. It's vital the NRF passes the House and the Senate, and we encourage everyone to get behind it.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Your time has expired. Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
And thank you for mentioning communities, particularly those right around regional Australia, Minister. So how will the National Reconstruction Fund support those very communities that rely on the ag sector across regional Australia?
Minister Watt.
Well, thank you, Senator Ciccone. More jobs, more exports, more opportunities and a better bottom line for regional Australia. Who wouldn't want that? Well, unfortunately, quite a few of those members opposite, it seems, are anti-manufacturing and anti-jobs. Whether it's Mr Dutton or Mr Littleproud or the Liberals and the Nationals here in the Senate, the Coalition only want to say no to this fund. More manufacturing in our regions? No. More value-adding in agriculture? No. More tax concessions for the top 0.5%? Oh, yes. Now, I am surprised that the Nationals in particular are opposing the National Reconstruction Fund. Not only does it contain the word national, but in the past they've claimed to support Aussie manufacturing. And instead, in fact, it wasn't that long ago that Senator Canavan was saying, quote, "We've all seen during the coronavirus how important it is to have industries that can produce things in the medical field to keep our food production and food security going, and after coronavirus we're going to need to have a strong manufacturing industry to recover."
Well, Senator
Canavan, have I got a solution for you?
Senator Watt, your time has expired. Senator Cash.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Prior to the election last year, the now Treasurer said, "This is a full-blown cost of living crisis, a triple whammy of skyrocketing costs of living, falling real wages and rising interest rates," and said, yet since the election, inflation has skyrocketed to its highest levels in 30 years, wages aren't keeping up, energy prices continue to rise, and just now, as we all know, the Reserve Bank has announced their 9th rise under this government. Minister, is it correct that under Labor's full-blown cost-of-living crisis, an average family with a $750,000 loan taken out prior to May will now be paying $1,470 more per month, or $17,688 a year extra on their mortgage?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Cash for the question. The senator is correct that the Reserve Bank at 2:30 today increased interest rates by 25 basis points to 3.6%. It's the 10th interest rate increase since they began in May 2022, prior to the election, when we entered the tightening cycle because of what was happening with the inflation challenge. So I do not accept the proposition put by Senator Cash that this is something that has occurred since the election. It was started before the election. It started before the issues that have led to the tightening cycle, which have been impacted by some of those global factors, which I think we all accept, started before the last election. On the cost of living, this is the real issue facing households, and it's good that we've come to it because the cost of living pressures are real on households, and that's why the government has been making some difficult decisions around the cabinet table because of the difficult decisions people are making around their kitchen table. That is why we have energy power bill relief coming in the budget to deal with it that you oppose. So don't sit here. Don't you dare sit here and cry crocodile tears about a cost of living crisis.
Order. Order. Minister, please continue.
Crocodile tears about your concern for a cost of living crisis when you opposed and have opposed the sensible measures we put in place to assist households with some of those increases in power bills. Remember that? Remember that? We won't let you forget it. As those bills come in, we will be reminding people that you voted against any support for cost of living relief in households across Australia.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Won't Labor's $45 billion in extra spending make inflation worse, while your productivity-sapping industrial relations sabotage agenda will make business weaker? Why are your government's policies making a difficult situation worse?
Minister.
Cash clearly hasn't read the budget papers. So a couple of things there. The funds have been factored into the budget and the forward estimates, okay? And the inflation forecasts are also there. So no, the answer to that is no. On no surprises here, and Senator Cash, no surprises here. Why are you putting in place laws that make sure that vulnerable workers can get decent pay rises? That is now the offence of this government, that we're putting in place laws that support affordable, sustainable wage increases for the most vulnerable of workers. We know you're opposed to it. We've just lived through 10 years of your deliberate design feature of your economic architecture being wage stagnation. The investments in the funds are about driving jobs, investment in supply chain and dealing with the housing crisis. And you're opposed to every single one of those measures.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Given Australians can expect further rate rises in the months ahead, why hasn't the government delivered the cost of living relief it promised last year for Australians to help with their energy bills? Why is the Albanese government all talk but no fix when it comes to addressing the cost of living pressures that Australians are facing?
Order. Order on my right. Order. Senator Cash. I'm not calling the minister until there's silence in the chamber. Senator Watt. Minister.
Thank you, President. I fear that someone who didn't like you wrote that question, Senator Cash. How could you possibly ask us, how could you possibly put to us, when you opposed the billions of dollars that we want to flow through the budget to give households energy bill relief? It is staggering that those who opposed it in December, and we will make sure that all the way to the next election, everyone knows that when we came to the parliament and said, here's $1.5 billion we would like to distribute to households and businesses across Australia to assist with some of the increases in energy prices, the No Coalition said no. You know what? No, you don't deserve it. You don't deserve this cost of living relief. And then the high to come in here and ask about what we're doing about cost of living relief on energy bills. Well, thank you very much for that, Dorothy.
Thank you, Minister.
Senator.
Your time has expired. Senator Wong.
I ask that further questions be placed on notice.
Thank you.